Hello, and welcome to the course How to Write Instrumental Cues for Television featuring Eddie Gray. This video presentation was originally a live webinar hosted by How to License Your Music Premium. The webinar was facilitated by me, Aaron Davison, and features Eddie Gray discussing the topic of how to write instrumental cues for television, and also features producer Gary Gray, who is both my producer and who has also worked extensively with Eddie on his production skills over the last several years. If you enjoy content like this, be sure to check out How to License Your Music Premium. How to License Your Music Premium hosts monthly live webinars like this one, and also offers dozens of more in-depth music business courses, music licensing leads, music business ebooks, music industry directories, one-on-one coaching, and much, much more for one low monthly price. For more information, visit htlympremium.com. That's HTLYM for How to License Your Music Premium.com.
Great job on Raise. I really like that one.
That was the one we did there. I think there's something. Are you seeing it, Eusebio?
Which one is it?
It's working.
Aaron,
you guys
what's
wrote a
Raise?
song called Raise. It was amazing.
Oh, did we rename it, Aaron?
Rays of Sunshine.
Rays of Hope. It's the one we did when I was there. Yeah, that one turned out great.
Do you see his video going left and right with a white?
I do. There's a paper. What is it? What's that white thing?
Paper in front of your thing?
Let me fix that. Hang on.
Oh.
It's
Looks like special effects.
They're drapes.
I thought that was like special effects.
Put headphones on, please. That's what Gary said. Gary's the boss. Because it's hard for me to talk and do this at the same time. Maybe say a couple words and just welcome everybody to the presentation.
Sure.
Tell us what you've been up to lately, Gary. What have you been working on?
Okay. Well, let's see. Right behind me here in my home studio, I'm working on a track for a 20th Century Fox right now. And I acquired that client back in December, which was good timing for the holiday season. And I've been doing some kind of epic productions. And this one happens to be a rock and orchestra epic production. So that's the last one I've been working on. And been in touch a lot. Actually, I'm doing a lot of work with both Aaron and Eddie, which I think between us in the last couple of weeks, we got 5 tracks placed, which is really cool. Big thumbs up for the team. And that's what this is all about. So we'll be covering a lot of how that happens and why that happens. And the main man in LA is Eddie Gray. And this guy is like on fire. He's, fortunately for Aaron and I, he touched both of our lives, and he took his talents and a little bit of what we taught him and a lot of his own determination, and just has been setting the world on fire. And we're just like so proud of Eddie. It's like where the student becomes the teacher. We're all learning from each other here. And Eddie has been an incredible person, just as a person. And you'll see that as a thread through a lot of what we talk about, which is your music has to be good, absolutely. Productions have to be good, absolutely. A lot of technical things have to be good, absolutely. However, senior to all of that, above all of that, is how you interact with people. And you'll just see it in these guys, as you listen to both Aaron and Eddie, the type of people they are. They're like, you want to hang out with them, you want to work with them. And that's why people, accept their tracks, besides the fact that they're awesome, is that they want to work with these guys. And that's really important, how you present yourself. So that's my introduction. Hopefully, Aaron, you're ready now.
Yeah, I'm ready to go. Thank you, Gary. So I want to welcome everybody officially to the webinar. Hopefully there are a number of you watching. We don't know exactly who's attending right now, but I know a lot of you are. So again, welcome to the webinar. This is going to be, we're going to go about an hour today. This is an hour-long presentation on how to write instrumental cues for television. And a lot of you already know Eddie Gray. A lot of you have checked out the course that I did with Eddie a couple months ago. I guess we did a course called How to Be a Full-Time TV Composer. And Eddie has been licensing his music for, how long has it been now, Eddie? About 4 or 5 years? When did you officially get started in this business?
Well, I started about 4 years and you see, November, December, January, February, March. So 4 years and 4 months, but I didn't really start licensing until my first year. I took the first year to learn the software, in my case Logic, to just kind of, you know, get my feet wet, learn about the industry. I took a lot of your courses, Gary's courses. So let's just say 3 years and 4 months.
Okay, cool, excellent. And Eddie has done a lot in a short amount of time. He's accomplished a lot in the space of licensing. How many songs to date? How many placements do you think you've had so far? Do you have like a ballpark idea of how many?
I stopped counting at 5,000. I thought at that point,
wow,
you just gotta let it go, you know.
That's amazing. So yeah, Eddie's been a great asset to howtolicenseyourmusic.com. I had a chance actually to meet Eddie for the first time a few months ago in September when I was in LA. So Eddie was kind of the first person I thought of in terms of doing a webinar. So again, we're going to go about an hour today. A couple quick things before I turn it over to Eddie. We don't have a live chat box set up for this webinar. So if you're watching, hopefully from the page within the members area, if you have questions throughout the webinar, if you think of questions while Eddie's talking, or there's anything in particular you would like us or Eddie to address, send your questions to Gary Gray. There's an email below the live video stream. There's his email address is posted below. So email Gary throughout the webinar. And then at the end of the webinar, for the last 10 or 15 minutes or so, we'll address any specific questions you have. So if you have questions, direct them to Gary throughout the webinar. We'll get to those at the end. Again, we're going to go about an hour, maybe a little longer, depending on how things go. But at this point, I'm going to turn it over to you, Eddie, and go ahead and start your presentation.
All right. Thank you so much. And as always, you know, I'm always going to start with gratitude. And I just wanted to say thank you to both of you for giving me the opportunity, the platform, for believing in me. And I'm truly excited about the myriad of possibilities that we can create in the near future. You know, I'm here to talk about how to write and arrange instrumental cues for TV. After years of doing this, there are certainly correlations that I'm starting to see. It's almost like the Matrix. I can see the zeros and the ones. And these are general truths, so I don't know it all, and I don't know it all for your specific project, but there are things that I can certainly, with full conviction, tell you that are going to work. So let's talk about some speculative themes and concepts. So a great wise man once said that music is the path of what is pleasing, predictable, and healing. So I want to cover those three topics. When we talk about something being pleasing, we're talking about something that is subjective to all of us. In other words, you can like heavy metal and you can find that to be really, you know, empowering and exciting. And some of us may not like metal. So when we're talking about something being pleasing, we're talking about something that's unique to everyone. We all have traits that are unique to us, and yet we all have you know, things that we all share in common. For example, we all feel sadness, we all feel happiness, joy, etc., etc. So we can all, on some level, come to the consensus that something is pleasing when we listen to a musical note, a tritone, a suspended chord. And these are the things that make great artists. Is we don't have to follow a cookie cutter format. We can find our own road and our own pathway, but we can take the lessons that, you know, the Beatles gave us, that Bob Marley gave us, that all these greats, Gary Gray gave us, and we could move forward with them. So when we talk about pleasing, the only thing I want to say about pleasing, the category of pleasing, is that we want to remove harshness or any abrupt qualities. So when you listen to a tone, it comes out of the speakers. Well, it goes into the interface, comes out of the speakers, and there's a sense that something is happening. You're turning nothing into something, and that is pleasing. To create, to have the ability, to have the opportunity to create. So I highly recommend you remove harshness from your tone, remove unwanted distortion. You know, these are all general concepts. I did create a YouTube video, which Aaron, how is that going to work? Is it?
Yeah, I linked to those below this video. So the 2 videos that you sent me should be, if you're on this page and you don't see the videos after the presentation, refresh the page and they'll be there. They're on the same page.
Yeah, and this video is going to cover one of my secret sauces that I use in the industry, and it's called the UAD PuigTech. Waves has their own version called Pultec, and then I think I mixed those 2 around. But regardless, Logic now has created its own version, and I talk about attenuating highs and removing harshness.
One of my favorite ways of eliminating and/or removing harshness from a track is by using the UAD Pultec. Waves makes their version. It's called the PuigTech. And then, of course, Logic has now made its very own vintage tube EQ. So let me demonstrate this on a drum track. Okay, great. So if I turn on, let's try this one by UAD first. I'm going to isolate 3000 hertz here. Here's before. Here's after. So we're talking about a smoother sound with more clarity and a subtle approach. Here, let's try the same thing with waves. I'll do it quickly. Here we'll attenuate 8000. Before. Just in your face, unpleasant to listen to, and with it, you can see how you can start blending things in a mix with these tools. Okay, so now let's use Logic's vintage tube EQ. I'm going to take a MIDI loop called the 12-string acoustic guitar, and I want to utilize this plugin. So we're going to turn it on, and here where it says high attenuation, we're going to go to 20 kilohertz, and we're going to take off the high sheen, the high air off of this track. Take a listen. Again, this is a subtle trick, but it is an incredible tactic to use to be able to blend numerous things in a mix. Let's try one last thing here. On a different frequency, we're gonna go ahead and cut at 1000 kilohertz, and I want you to hear what this sounds like. Take a listen. Here it's bypassed.
So now we're going to move into predictable. The best way I can describe this is when you're watching a movie, there's a main character, you have a sense of where the story is going, and this creates a basis of understanding. It allows us to communicate my ideas to your ears so that you can comprehend it. The Dark Knight Rises, one of the greatest things about that movie is you fall in love with Christian Bale. You fall in love with that character, and that's what this is about. Is about the audience, the viewer, falling in love with your choice of tones, with the way that you arrange your music. It's a presentation. This is who you are. Your music is a reflection of who you are. So this is this quality of being predictable. And by the way, Gary, if you want to chime in, I'd love to hear. I'd love this to be a conversation where all of us can chime in. But predictability is really about setting a tone, creating a space so that others can be a part of what it is you're doing sonically.
Yeah, awesome.
Do you have
I
anything,
would,
do you have anything to
yeah, I
add,
would
Sam?
just, yeah, sure.
Okay.
Is some people shy away from music theory. I know, Eddie, you dove in there and really mastered that whole thing. You know, from the beginning of your career, you've really come a long way on that. Some people think that music theory, learning it can be sometimes stifling, or, you know, there's these ideas that when you do learn music theory, you'll find that it creates incredible freedom and consistency. The only thing I wanted to add it is that this predictability, there are certain chord changes that people are, you could say, used to, or that they like. Take a blues fan, you know, the blues is completely predictable, and yet blues fans will listen to blues till they die and they love it, and it's totally predictable. So it kind of ties into healing. There are certain chord changes that are predictable and healing, and that's why people love to listen to them over and over. So you can throw in a bit of surprise, but I think if you have, usually we're talking about like 75% predictable, 25% surprise, like somewhere in there, tends to create a real nice recipe. Just wanted to add that in there.
Tying us into healing. This is the one that so we've gone over pleasing, predictable, and now healing. This has a lot to do with frequencies. We can all agree that music is a very healing medium. I don't know if all of us can describe exactly why, the science of why it works, why it touches us. I mean, I remember when I was like 16 years old, or 17, I was driving home from school, and Don Henley's "The Heart of the Matter" came on. This is an old school song. I literally had to stop my car, and I had to just pause, because I realized I was in the presence of greatness, and it was just such an incredible moment. All of a sudden, I just started crying. There was no reason. It wasn't like I was going through a challenging time. It's just the power of that moment, the frequencies, their selection of tones, and the lyrics. He was so passionate. Don Henley's performance. So, healing is something that is a part of our music that we should strive towards. But I think a lot of it has to do with surrendering. When you're writing your music, letting go. This isn't something, we're not building a house in the sense that we're, grabbing jackhammers and hammering. We're not trying to pound this out. There may be periods of having to work hard, and periods where you have to, intentionally make it happen or create it. But in that process, at some point, you have to let go and let the song be what it is. In other words, any phenomenal producer at some point will say, this song is done for now. And we all know, all the great artists, great poets, they all say that, a true work is never done. And so at some point you have to let that go, and there's this quality of surrendering and letting go, and surrendering and letting go. Is there anything else you want to add to that, Gary? The healing component?
Yeah. I would say a good workable definition for when a track is done is when there's no weak links emotionally from the very first note to the last moment of silence in that track. You're just looking for this consistent, emotional, pleasing, experience for the listener. So just wanted to add that.
Before we started working together, Gary, I actually used to just work on songs. I'd work on the B section. I'd get to the end and I'd say, okay, cool. And I would just render, I'd bounce. It wasn't until we started working together that I actually would listen from beginning to end, hundreds, thousands of times, and that's when I really started to grow as a somebody who was green in the industry, and then, somebody now who, is a little bit deeper into the industry. So yeah, man, that's a great tip. Listen from beginning to end. I want to move into a few other components. This next one is called Simple. And the reason I wanted to add this is because I was mixing the other day. I'm working on some stuff. We've all been collaborating on Music for Born This Way season 4, which is coming up. And as I was mixing, I was working on a track. I had about 40 different, software instruments and drums and all this stuff. I started to mute different parts of the song. And as I was muting, the song started to almost kind of come together. Like I could hear the vision. It's like, it's almost as if I was looking at a painting, a mosaic painting, and it was kind of like obscure, and I didn't really understand what was on there. And as soon as I started to remove elements from the song, I could see the vision clearly. And so this next component, called simplicity, it's about eliminating layers and trying to get to the essence of the song. One of the things I like about Hans Zimmer is that he records his drums last. I don't always do this, but I'm shocked by the approach. You would think that, we should have the drums first, second, third, right? Such an important part of the song, but that says something. The fact that he's making it very easy to make sonic choices, and so it's about listening to the work and then kind of mixing, taking your time, listening, removing elements. I talk to a lot of composers, and a lot of young guys, they're just doing too much. They're adding too many themes or counterpoint melodies. They're layering too many tracks. They're trying to be different, and they're trying to be cool, and it's not working in their favor. Sometimes you just kind of have to use the tools and use them in a discretionary way, but in a way that is powerful and unique by itself. You don't have to overcomplicate it. So anything to add, Gary? Anything you want to add to simple?
Yeah, no, I think that was really well said. It's easy to overdo. And yeah, I guess one last thing I would add on that is, and you're excellent at this, Eddie, which is when you end up with your simple elements, so maybe you started with 40 and now you're down to 8 or something, right?
Right.
Or 10. Now you can spend time crafting those individual sounds, and that's what can really pull the listener into the quality of those individual sounds rather than this big tapestry of complexity. So,
right.
Yeah.
Can I jump in really quick,
Yeah,
Eddie?
please.
So, so several months ago, Gary and I started collaborating on tracks together to submit to Eddie for some shows he's working on. And one of the first things we did was this instrumental guitar piece that had tons of guitar soloing and way too many notes. And we played it for Eddie, and he said, "This is I don't know what to do with this, Aaron. This is nice, but this totally doesn't work for the types of shows that I work on." And so then we went back to the drawing board, and based on some very specific reference tracks Eddie gave us, we came up with some much more suitable tracks. Can you talk a little bit about knowing when there's just too much going on versus knowing when you're sort of in the ballpark in terms of simplicity? Because I feel like this is a really important, I feel like this is one of those topics, if you don't know what you know, Eddie, you could be totally shooting in the dark and missing out on opportunities and not knowing why. So I don't know if you're going to play tracks during, I know we have some tracks below this video. Are you going to play anything during the webinar that sort of demonstrates the right amount of notes and how to approach things melodically?
I mean, I can try. I'm not sure if it's going to play through my speakers on the computer or not. Should we just run it and see how it goes?
Why don't we just try? And, if it sounds good, we'll go with it. If not, we can reference tracks after the webinar for people to check out.
Should I try through screen share, or should I just play them?
Why don't you just play it? I mean, I can hear you super clearly, so I would imagine if you can, like, even if the audio isn't perfect, I just want to give people a really good idea of what we're talking about.
Okay, here's a really good idea. So I have a song called Picture. The only reason I wrote it is because, going back to simple, I play in what's called a modal fashion, which basically means I play according to blocks. So if you look at a guitar, you've got the first and the third fret, the third and the fifth. So I play very modally. And in piano, same thing. I'm very pattern based. So I had this thing that I just kept playing for like weeks, and I didn't even know the names of the chords. I was just kind of. And this song called Picture, which again, Aaron will send you the actual track so you can listen to. It's a very simple song. So let's take a listen and see if and you guys give me the thumbs up or not.
But yeah, I just want to make sure everybody sort of understands the simplicity topic, because I feel like it's really important. Maybe talk a little bit about why, in terms of like not interfering with dialogue, and why it's so important not to have your tracks too busy.
It really is, taking a screenshot or taking a picture of a moment, and that's why I call that song Picture, because I was intentionally trying to create a sonic landscape. And when you say something fancy like that, or when you hear somebody talk about sonic landscapes, and it sounds a lot bigger than it really is, but it's just a moment, and the idea is that you give different music supervisors, publishers, music houses, all these different moments, and they and editors, and they can select for their scenes and their projects and ads, what it is that they want to accomplish sonically. So this is one of the things that I think Gary's better just explaining, but the more, here's a guarantee: the more you work on your craft and the more you commit yourself to it, the easier this starts to become, and the answers will kind of come to you. It's almost like your intuition, your better judgment will say, okay, that's just too much bass, remove this kick. Sometimes when I sit and I write, or stand and I write, I pretend like I have an assistant, an invisible assistant, and she is helping me make these decisions, and I'm just trusting my better judgment. And man, more often than not, I make phenomenal choices based on trusting myself. But this, I've also put thousands of hours into doing this. So simplicity, Gary, please enlighten us.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the main function, that Eddie is performing is, if you look at the dialogue of a TV show as the melody, and then what you're doing is you're filling in the rest of the song. So the melody is something that is happening on the visual medium, and then your melody is going to really be a counter melody. And so counter melodies are typically pretty simple,
right?
Where the main melody is the featured thing that the person wants to listen to. And just from observing Eddie and his career, I can say, and I watch the shows where his music is on there, and the dialogue, you can focus on the dialogue and feel the music at the same time without any competition happening between these two things. And that's the craft that I think, Eddie, that you've really perfected really well. Like, I'm listening to that track you just played there now, and on its own, the melody is actually beautiful, but it allows this other melody to become the featured element of your track. Like, the whole track is the dialogue and your music.
Right.
So, and I think you've found a really, really good balance there, so that it's not too much, and yet it's still supplying the emotion that's needed to carry that moment.
Yeah, like that. Going back to some of the conversations we've had, that melody, da na na na, right? I could have added 100 more notes within that, but that was enough in that specific instance, and so you have to know when to pull back, and that takes some skill. But I do want to tie in Picture to the next category, which is contemporary. You heard that track, sounds contemporary. The only reason I mention this is because I've been listening to a lot of soundtracks. The Luke Cage on Netflix, phenomenal soundtrack. Westworld, HBO, Stranger Things. And even though, for example, Luke Cage has a lot of like R&B, like really vintage stuff, it still sounds extremely modern. And so I wanted to put that in there so that people can make some adjustments. If you're a funk expert, that's fantastic, but you're going to have to somehow sometimes learn how to translate it to the modern day. Because if that's the difference between you getting a job or not, then I say go for it, right? Buy some new samples, figure out how to make your drums a little bit more contemporary. And this is in some way tied into drums. Again, another generality, but there is something about creating, a picture, a landscape, and then just adding like modern drums, modern elements, risers, and things like that. But if you can, go and listen to Stranger Things, an ode to the synthesizers of the 70s and 80s. and it sounds extremely modern. You know, the way they're performing, the choices that they're making. So anyway, these are 6 components that I feel tie into making professional instrumental tracks for TV. If you have any questions, please email us. What was your email? Are you using Music Ignition?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, there's an email address below the video. So yeah, if you guys have questions, if anything comes to mind, send them to Gary. He's going to moderate. Do you have? We're only at about 2. I can't see the time. I think it's about 2:25. So we have a good half hour left. Do you have any other points?
Oh yeah, no. Yeah, we're moving along here.
Oh, okay, good. I thought you were saying. I thought you were wrapping up. Continue onward and upward.
So anyway, please watch the 2 videos that I provided. One of them is called Removing Harshness, and the other one is called Unpredictable. Wait a minute. Sorry, let me remember. What was that second one called? Anyway, watch the videos. Oh, I'm sorry.
Proper way to end a track was
right.
The other one.
Which we're getting to next. So, okay, so now let's talk about the basic building blocks of a track. Again, some commonalities that we all use to differing degrees, but let's try and see how we can make these work for you. When we talk about a track, we're talking about different components. 1, rhythm. Number 2, like in the track picture, you know, you've got that kind of that shaker in the back, and it's kind of moving the track along. Then you've got the melody, da na na na, right? And then you've got a percussive element, which is not necessarily the same as rhythm, insofar as it can be a sound effect. It can be a way to transition. So we've got rhythm, melody, percussion, and then we've got transitions and turnarounds. And so we're going to talk about those a little bit. Transitions, these could be like pre-choruses or like a bridge, or maybe like a segue, like a 2-bar segue going from A to A, so an A section to an A section, and you just put 2 bars within. And again, in the examples that I sent off, there's one called adding 2 bars in a sequence. And if you plug these into your DAW and you loop them, I think you'll really start to understand what it is that I'm trying to say here. So again, transitions are not the same as turnarounds. A turnaround can be a part of a section that kind of loops everything together. Let's talk about percussion. Stuart Copeland from The Police, he said, drums are not something you play. He said they're not music. They're something that you feel, And so when you make your drum parts, try and feel what it is that you're performing. Don't, don't always just try and serve the song. When I listen to a lot of music, new composers, people who need, help, I hear like they're just kind of they're just doing it, and they're not like feeling the music, and they're not putting themselves into it. So that's another thing is really trying to feel your way into the music and creating a moment, as we talked about. Let's go into how to build momentum. Okay, the optimum track for TV is you want to avoid diamond shapes. So you've got the diamond, goes here, goes up, and it comes down. This is indicative of somebody who's just using loops, or they're not really crafting a song. They're just kind of putting it together and then spitting it out. So what you want to aim for is a cone shape. So rather, it's more starts quiet and then kind of opens up, crescendo, and then you get to the peak. Every song doesn't have to be structured that way, but this seems to be a winning formula. Now, after a while, you want to keep changing things up. You can create the cone, come up for a crescendo, pause, right? Create a moment of anticipation, and then start that over again. Cone. And that can be your song. So it'd be that kind of cone shape, and you can do that twice. I wouldn't recommend you do it 3 times, but again, it's all dependent on the project. I've been noticing a lot of companies, a lot of networks really enjoying the ABAA format. You've got your intro. We'll just simplify it, piano and percussion, right? We got 4 bars of that. Then you repeat your section. This time you add more elements, make it full. You're kind of giving, people or your audience the point. What is the point of your song? What are you trying to express, right? And then you bring in a B section. So the way, Gary explained this to me was like, we're all having a conversation, we're all hanging out, and we're talking about cars, right? And then, all of a sudden we start talking about cars in the context of, the freeway or the Autobahn, and all of a sudden we're still having a conversation about cars, but we've moved and we've transitioned to something else that's related to cars, and that's the B section. So it's the same song, but another take, another interpretation, and then after the B section, you go back to the A section, but you start to add different elements, percussion, another melody, maybe some strings to add emotion and depth, and then finally the last A section, crescendo, or maybe a turnaround, boom, 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 and then sting out, you're out. So that would be A, B, A, and A. Let's see here, tension, and then we're to build momentum, and Gary, tell me if you agree with me on this. It's really all about tension and release. To build a track properly, it's about learning how to be a craftsman and making, allowing songs to provoke your listener, to make you feel something. When you listen to the tracks that I've included in this webinar, there's a track called Disoriented. It's a perfect television tension cue. Somebody's arguing, or there's a moment of anger or what have you. It completely encompasses this idea of anger and it building, and so music is really truly about tension and release. So Gary, what do you think? How does one build tension and release? Like, what are some things you can look at?
Great question, and I do totally agree with you on that. If you know any theory, then you'll know that there are suspensions. And for those of you that don't, you can actually just simply Google this and learn a lot about it, which is there are things like 4/3 suspension, 9/8 suspension, where you have a note in a chord that doesn't belong to that chord, but you enter it into a chord, and it sounds a little almost wrong, but if you do it with in the right range with the right instrument, it actually sounds like a beautiful tension, but it's tension. And then you allow it to release. So that's one tool you can use, which is just pure music theory, but it's not real advanced. I mean, anybody can learn this. Then there's rhythmic tensions and releases, and those are very interesting. You can have, let's say you start your track and it's flowing, and then you want to add some tension, so you add little bits of syncopation and things that are a little unpredictable. That's like a tension. And then you create it so it's predictable. That's a release. Another way is with your production. You can just take your drums and all of a sudden make them lo-fi and filter them and have them become a little bit like mysterious sounding, more modern sounding, and like where they're not so focused, and it's kind of a tension. And then you clarify them with your production, and that's a release. There's a lot. I guess we could do a whole webinar probably on tension and release. Don't you think, Eddie?
Yeah, it's just at its most basic level, like if we're counting on, on every third note, 1, 2, 2. If I take that pattern and then every other bar, if I clap on the 4, for example, 1, 2, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, and all of a sudden you create a different feel, and that on top of different elements in your song will create tension. And then you could release by maybe playing that same pattern but just on the 4, so You just have to keep working, keep doing stuff, and let your emotions dictate what's happening in the song. Does it need more tension? Do we need just to be calm? Does it need to be simplistic? And of course, a lot of this is guided by what's happening in the scene itself. For example, sometimes I'll get, you know, a call by a supervisor or editor, and they'll say, "Hey, we need some music that, you know, a couple is, you know, starting to talk about getting together and moving in together or something like that." That's going to require a certain type of feel. You know, you're not going to put a rock track over that or something. You know, so all of a sudden you start thinking, okay, what can I do? They're being emotionally intimate. They're being emotionally vulnerable. How about I just start with a simple pad? You know, maybe a guitar, and you know, you try and treat that scene in a certain way. So, how to build momentum? I hope that helps. Again, these things start to become a lot more obvious the more you work on your music. So keep working on the music. Anything else you want to add, Mr. Gray?
I think you covered that one very well. Yeah.
Okay. Good. The second video that I created for you guys is called Proper Way to End a Track. And man, this one is the most startling one of all to me. Again, I've been doing this for a little while, but people will send me tracks, and the way they end is insane to me. Like, you know, the song's going along and then it'll just cut off. You know, like when they rendered it, you know, they just kind of created a loop region and they just stopped before the ending. You know, and that to me doesn't really make any sense, because it shows, you know, lack of professionality. It shows that they don't care about their music. There are some small things you can do to you know, basically put yourself at a different level than the competition. One of the things that I always utilize is called Reverb Tails. It is covered in the video. And man, this tool is a lifesaver. If there's one takeaway from this entire webinar, it's how to use Reverb Tails effectively in your songs. Not necessarily just for the end, but especially for the end. But during any transitions, like if you go from loud to quiet, you know, you want to use a little bit of reverb to kind of cover it up a little bit and make your transitions nice and smooth. I do this every session, 100% of the time. There's not one session that goes by where I do not work and utilize this tool. So please take a look at that video, and I feel like that would add a lot of value to what you guys are up to. Let's go into only definitive endings. Again, a TV show is running. You get to the end of a scene. You don't need a fade, right? There's zero reason to be doing fades. And you should never do a fade when it comes to television. We want to have a natural transition, or what they call a sting out, where you end on the one. If you want to play it safe when it comes to writing cues for television, always end on the one. You know, it's the end of, let's just create a simple phrase, one, right? Again, sometimes I understand that you may get bored of that, that you may want to, you know, entice yourself or stimulate yourself in a different way. But if you're not sure about how to end your song, this is a sure way of getting it right.
Eddie, I just wanted to say that, yeah, for those that are that know theory, they would know what that means. And just in case you don't, if you're in the key of F, you know, one is the F chord. So you might go to B flat, then you might go to C, then you might go to whatever. And when you end on the one, it means end on F, end on that chord.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, and to kind of tie something into that, usually in instrumental cues, I rarely hear transpositions, you know, when you change a key. So if you're on F, you know, don't move up to F sharp or G or don't. Again, generality, but 90-95% of the time that seems to be true. And then modulations, this requires a little bit more understanding of music theory, but you have to be really careful with how you use them. Again, I only hear them in about 10%, if not 5% of the tracks out there, you know, in television. So if you want to learn modulations, maybe we can cover that another time. But let's stick to just ending on the tonic, on the root note. And I think that's a safe bet for now.
Yeah, and one thing on that, Eddie, which you do really well at, You know, if you use a modulation, the music editor, if he wants to splice your track and make it longer, then he's stuck because it's going to go from this key that you started in, and then if you modulate it to a new key and he tries to loop it, he's going to go to the next track. You're going to get a rejection right there.
Yeah, it really is about satisfying the music editors, because the supervisors are kind of like, the gatekeepers. They kind of allow the music to come in. And then after that, it's the editor that selects it, that actually is looking at, depending on what program they're using, iTunes, SoundHound, and they select it, they bring it in. Of course, the final decision then is made by the producer, director, post-editor, but the music editor is the guy you want to go after.
The proper way to end a track. Most of the time, I see new artists, new composers who are up and coming, and they're rushing to finish the track, to make an impression, and to try and get a gig. The most important thing is that you take care of your music and that you put all of your being into it. Let's talk about some do nots. Definitely do not fade. No fades, ever. 0. Unless it's requested by the music supervisor or the person that you're working with. I do want to show you reverb tails. These have really been useful to me in my career. So let's cover that. So this track here, I've utilized 3 different methodologies to end. One is a reverse effects riser. The next one is a piano. And then the last one is a one-shot. So I'll show you those in a bit, but let's cover this reverb tail. So if we go to piano B section here, rather than allowing this track to end like this, which it already sounds pretty good, there's already some reverb on there. What we're going to do is we're going to add an inordinate amount, so it sounds really cool and really fat and really interesting. So let's find a good patch here. Let's go reverb, large spaces. I'm gonna go with the hall, and I'll go with church tower. So all you have to do is automate the reverb into the track. Okay, so go into the track, go into main. I just chose the church tower here, and we'll just kind of raise it up like this. Take a listen. Let me solo it. Really nice way so the track sounds natural as it ends. So that's my first tip. The next is obviously adding a reverse effects riser. Does a lot by way of adding dramatics and just making a track sound exciting. So check this out. These are the small things that can make a great impact. Of course, ending on the 1. Here's a big piano hit. This is a good first choice. I would say that's your first choice there. But different shows might require different approaches. And I really like this one shot. This is something I've been doing lately. Again, this lends itself to just big emotions, big impact. Check this out. And if we got rid of the piano per se, listen to this. No right or wrong way, but there are some guidelines for you. Again, we want definitive endings. We don't want abrupt music that instantly just cuts off. It should naturally fade out, allowing the listener to pause and exhale after they took in your music.
Try and utilize the ABAA format. I'm starting to see it in a lot of libraries. Every time I just signed on with a new publisher this week, and they were very insistent on bringing in the A, creating some type of change or emotional, feel distinction, and then bringing back the theme, but elevating it by adding drums, by adding synths, et cetera, et cetera. So just kind of want to reinforce that, because it seems like the industry might be kind of leaning in that direction. Let's see here. When you listen to the song Picture, I want to talk about the formats that I use, just so you can, listen with intent and try and have this, be a moment of study and research. The format is really simple. It's really just A, B, A, B. You've got that main part. I go into a B section. I reintroduce the A part, but this time I bring an arpeggio into the song. And then finally, we just end with the B section. To add a little bit of an unpredictable quality, what I do is I end the song on the 2. I don't end it on the 1. I end it on the 2. Do you mind if I demonstrate that really quick?
Go for it.
All right. So let me just forward to the end here. Oh, here we go. Let's try it again. 1, 2. 1, 1, 4, 1, 2. So that was just, a stylistic choice. I thought it was nice and smooth and kind of different. So that's how that's.
Does that, sorry to cut you off, does that little bit of difference make much of a difference in terms of having your track selected?
Well, I'm saying this, with the complete sense of, being humble, but a craftsman can do things and make it sound like he's not doing them. In other words, I think I did a pretty good job of making it sound like it just ended. No one would have thought twice about it. But had it been somebody else, maybe that would have sounded a little disjointed, or that's why I'm saying, be safe, keep it on the 1. So as soon as you start to develop some confidence, you start to believe in your work, you can kind of start trying different things out. Is it going to make or break it? Absolutely not. But it is the little things, man. I have a lot of people that love and trust my work now, because they know that this batch of 20 songs is going to be good, and they're not going to have any notes, or they're going to have minor notes, and it's about the little things, as you know. Gary, anything?
No, that's a really good way to frame it. The little things, because as we've gone over for hours, Eddie, it's the attention to detail. It's and that's one thing that anyone like Eddie is so good at, and why he's consistently being sought after and used for television music, is they know when they go through those tracks that they don't have to go through his tracks, because they know he has. So he's running quality control on all his stuff.
Man, we had a conversation once, Gary, and you said any track can be a masterpiece. You just have to put the right amount of time into it. Man, I've spent up to, I'm not kidding you, 40, 50, 60 hours on one song. The last ad that I did, national ad, it was a great placement. I spent 30 hours on the mix alone. So not even the creation of it, but just sitting down, really taking my time with everything, seeing if everything's blending. So yeah, man, every song can be an incredible piece of work, even if it's a simple reflective song, or when I say an amazing piece of music, I don't mean that it's complicated. I just mean that it's a beautiful piece of work that no one can deny. Even if I don't like your style of music, I can say, yeah, that guy's great. He's doing great work,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, and I'm glad you said that, Eddie, because there's so many tutorials out there and so many interviews and stuff, and it's great to hear you just say it like it is, because there's this thing where people will spend the 30 or 40 hours on a track, okay?
Right.
And then they're getting interviewed, they're doing a webinar, they're doing a tutorial, and for whatever reason, I don't know if it's pride or what it is, they'll say, "Oh yeah, I did this in a day. It probably took me about 8 hours," and it's really a disservice. It's a disservice to people because, okay, so if you're doing a TV track like pictures, I know that didn't take you 30 or 40 hours. It's a lot less.
Right.
But you still worked in a detailed fashion with quality control.
Right.
And listening all the way through more than once, feeling the emotion, And so it's great to hear you present it in a realistic way, the way that this actually goes down,
Yeah, it's simple, man. When I work, I picture myself being a guy that instead of coming home, and playing video games or watching football, which is nothing wrong with that, by the way. I like to, or working on my car, guys just work on their cars and stuff. I just work on music. It's what I love to do, and I prefer to do this than anything else in this world. So I want you to listen to the next track, the format on Disoriented, which is, again, I would say a perfect television tension cue, is just a layering method where you're taking the same theme for an entire 3 minutes, 2 minutes, but you're working on it in a very crafty way. And so it's about layering, but layering in a simplistic and professional manner. The one thing that I want you to listen to at the end of the track, which I won't demonstrate here, but the only change that does happen at the very end when I reintroduce the theme is I change the bass line of the track to add depth, to add tension. The song at that point, in my opinion, needs to be stirred up. So when you listen to Disoriented, take in the first half, let it kind of drown you, and then the second half, listen to that bass line and see how that impacts you and your being. So let's. Anything else, Gary? Are we good there?
No, I think that's great. I'd love to hear the track. Yeah.
Sonically, I want them to hear the bass, and yeah.
Cool.
To sum it all up, I just want to say that this is go time. If you watched my course, how to be a full-time TV composer. We talked about setting up your sessions, knowing what kind of composer you are, having an honest self-assessment of what it is you can do and what you can't do. I pounded the idea of learning your tools, but this is really about just working, and there's, it doesn't matter how many tutorials you watch, it doesn't matter how many lessons you get. What matters is sitting down and working on this stuff. I think about Jack White, such an intense guy. I love his music, and he talks about how he wrestles with his music, and I know some of you may be saying, well, you guys are saying a bunch of kind of contradictory words: simplicity, unpredictability. But the truth is that this is music. It's a powerful medium, and it's just the other side of the coin. So wrestle with your music. Your career is worth it. Your dreams are worth it. This isn't about studying. The only way you're going to learn this craft is by doing it. The only way you're going to learn how to surf is by doing it. The only way you're going to learn how to be in a relationship is by doing it. So don't wait for inspiration. That's how I want to end this. I don't want you to wait for that perfect moment. I have a child, and sleeping patterns can be very varied. And there's no perfect moment. You just have to get up and do it again, and get up and do it again. And that's what I want to reinforce, is just you have to work every day. If that means, for example, if one of your weaknesses is not being able to get your hands on the piano and play, then study piano. If you don't understand orchestration, study orchestration. We've got all the tools available. We've got all the tutorials available. It's yours. If you want it, it's all here for us. So I just want to empower you guys to do it. I did it. I'm no different than you guys. Gary helped me. I was lucky enough to be able to work with him. And he and Aaron have showed me the way. And that's pretty much it. If you guys have any questions, I'm here to serve. I'm here to give you what I can. But the only thing that's going to change your life is you have to just do the work. And that's my time. Thank you.
So we have about 9 minutes left. Gary, have you had a chance to check to see if any questions have come through?
Yeah, we have some questions coming through. You want me to give them to Eddie?
Yeah. Let's move on to the questions. I want to make sure we get to everybody's questions. So yeah, let's jump into those.
Great. First question, Eddie, is what were those plugins Eddie mentioned that remove harshness? The last one was new to Logic.
Right. Logic just released an update 10.4. Well, they just released another one, 10.4.1, but in that new upgrade, they released what's called a vintage tube collection, and they basically made their own version of a Puig or a Pultec. So if you scroll down into EQ, you'll see it. Just go right in there, and it's just as good. It sounds just as good as the Waves one. I think the UAD one sounds a little bit better, but that's just my own personal bias.
Awesome. Another question. Is it possible to explain what the diamond shape format is more like and why it doesn't work for TV cues?
Well, it kind of goes back to, just think about any show that you've watched. Most shows will usually end a scene on a high note, kind of keeps the viewer captivated. So if you create a diamond, just kind of boom, boom, you don't have the impact, or at least you're going to make the editor's job, the most important person, remember, the editor, you're going to make the editor's job a nightmare in terms of trying to, make your track work. So it really is about making their lives easier. So when you work with the cone, height peak is at the end, all of a sudden they have their sting out. They have a way to get out of the scene. Another thing that I've seen, which is really interesting, editors will take my tracks, right? I create the cone, and maybe they need a little more time, or they need a moment of respite, and they'll add a pad or something just to kind of make up for that extra 5-10 seconds. So these guys know what they're doing. Let's give them the ability to and the songs to do their job. So that's why the cone works a little bit better. Again, no absolutes, but 80-90% of the time that cone's going to serve you well.
Awesome. Next question is there a standard length to cues for TV?
Yes and no. I would say about 90% of the work situations that I'm in, I'm always seeing 1:30 to 2 minutes. I work with some companies that have no time requirements, but it seems like that's the winning number there, man. 1:30 to 2 minutes.
Excellent. Next question is, can you say more about the difference between turnarounds and transitions that you mentioned earlier?
Yeah, I was fumbling on my words, so forgive me about that. Okay, a turnaround is like a 2-bar phrase, a 1-bar phrase that allows you to connect your A section to your B section. So let's just say you've got a running theme, and then we hit a bar of dun ba dun 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 boom B section. So I wouldn't call that a section in and of itself. Like I wouldn't call that a C section. I would call that a turnaround. And this is probably the best way to define it. If it shows up in your song more than one time, then it's a turnaround. If it shows up one time, it's a transition. So for example, you got the end of a theme, a phrase, and all of a sudden you've got a pad with a riser, and it just happens one time in the middle of your song, I would say that's a transition.
Cool. Excellent. All right, let me go through the emails. I got a few more questions here. Okay, here's one says, I've been starting to get some placements and realize that different companies ask for different things. How should I approach that in my production?
Oh man, I've got such a great system for this. So if you're using a Mac and you go to your desktop and you hit Command T, you create, I like to create it here on my sidebar, but basically you create a folder called Submission Protocols. Within that folder, I've got different folders suggesting all the different things. Like I'll open a couple up here. So here's the first one. MP3, vocal wave, instrumental wave, lyrics. Okay. Next company, submission guidelines, AIFF 4816, full mix, no drums, _mix, drums and bass, and add the BPM to the title. So again, this is really about being a professional, being clear about what you're doing. Man, the last thing that I would want anything to happen, anything bad to happen to any of you guys, and like, putting the wrong song in the wrong library, or anything like that. So if I or any of us can help you with that, let us assist you. But having the submission protocol system, again, will just allow you to look like such a pro, and people will just keep asking you to come back and keep working with this. I have guys who message me every single week because they already know I follow the system, I play by the book. It's not that complicated. Just create a folder, submission protocol with a little Word doc or something, and you're in.
Awesome. I could. Let me just look through these emails again here. Here we go. I have one technical question. What LUFS level should I target for music cues for TV? So he's talking loudness units.
Yeah, I say 10 to 16. And even that's a little bit aggressive. Some people are going to ask for 12 to 16, but I would say that's a good range, 10 to 16.
Good, excellent. And he says, he also says, thanks to the three of you for the great webinar.
Oh, there you go.
Awesome. All right, and let's see if I got any more in here. What advice would you give to someone who's just starting out as far as getting cues accepted for television?
Yes. Read the manual. That's my advice to everybody. But to be more specific, it really is about standing out. It's about having a good quality product. And remember that one of my first big placements was done on a Scarlett interface, $100, and a laptop that had 4 gigabytes of RAM. So you don't have to have all the best gear in the world, but you have to know how to use it, or at least be extremely dogged and determined to make it. So it's a numbers game. It's a numbers game. Please don't put out one track and expect to make millions of dollars. You have to keep working. You have to keep networking, make connections, and the connections you already have, you have to foster them. You got to take care of your people, keep reaching out to them, care about other people's lives. Don't just be a pariah and try and use people. Be genuine, man, because people will keep working with you. I just closed a really big deal. I had my best month in business simply because the person liked me. I've always been kind. I've always asked her, how are you, and how's life, and I'm utterly convinced that it wasn't the music, that it was really just the partnership, and the music happened to be there, and I was ready, and I had the infrastructure, but just be a good person and read the manual and work every day.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I've got actually a bunch more. I can just send them to you because it looks like we're at about an hour.
Yeah. How many more questions do you have, Gary? I wanted to try to get through as many of them as possible, but we're at about an hour.
Yeah, let me take a look here. Okay. Do you want me to continue, Aaron? I've got a few more.
Eddie, do you have a few more minutes?
Yeah, let's maybe a couple, 2 or 3.
Want to go? Let's go like 5 more minutes, and then we'll wrap up. I want to be respectful of your time, but yeah, let's do 2 more.
All right. Is there a standard set of stem files I should create?
Yes, I'm going to give them to you right now. Full mix, no drums, only drums, and even that one may not be necessary, but just create it anyway. Only drums and bass, underscore mix, which sometimes is called narrative, which means no lead, and a 30-second mix and a 60-second mix. Another thing I've been seeing in the industry is people are starting to ask for 60-second edits and 30-second edits. This includes massive companies like Jingle Punks and a lot of other publishers. I'm starting to see the trend move in that direction. And the reason, always going back to the editors, the reason they want that is to make their lives easier. If they have a 30-second spot they need to fulfill, rather than having to go through all these tracks, they just go through their bumper list, which that's a bumper 30 and 60. And all of a sudden now it narrows their search, and they can perform their job with clarity and organization.
Awesome. And how about one more, Aaron?
Yeah, let's do one more.
Okay, good. All right, the next one says, I have a full-time job and a family, and I'm working part-time on, working part-time on creating a career in music licensing. How can I manage my time better?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, I want to say, God bless you for going for your dreams. Everybody that I meet a lot of people like Uber drivers, and all these people are like, oh, can you help me? And, I want to help you, believe me, but the person that has to help you the most is you. My life changed when I met Aaron, when I met Gary. So the first piece of advice is to find the proper mentorship, is to find the proper friends, people that actually care about how your life turns out, not just the dollar amount, but where you end up, and you'll know. You want to know how you'll know? They'll spend some time with you. They'll talk to you. They'll look you in the eyes, or they'll look you in your web camera. But you can hear the sincerity of their voice. And when somebody sees that somebody's trying, like just yesterday, I spoke to somebody, an Uber driver, and he's been calling me and texting me. I poured into him and I can't do that every single day or every single, right? But at that moment, that was my time to encourage him and to help him. So I highly recommend you find the proper mentorship to guide you along the path. If you can't find the right people, then at least, or mentors, then at least find the right community. In other words, partners to write with, peers that you can write with. That way you create a system where if you're falling down and you're feeling weak or discouraged, they can pick you up, and vice versa. When they're out of sorts, they can pick you up and you guys can kind of fight the good fight together. I had an incredible system of great peers. In fact, right before I got my big break, one of my friends said, I was really down, and I called him and he said, composer, he said, if anybody can do it, Eddie, it's you. And the way he said it, it clicked, and it wasn't but 3 weeks later that I ended up getting a job with A&E. So, you know, mentorship, the proper community. You said you're married and you have kids. I hope and I pray that your wife is supportive and that she understands and what you're doing, and that you have a plan. That's also part of your community. The kid part, I can't help you because I'm still sorting it out myself. But I did it myself for four years, you know, and I don't recommend, you know, living an unhealthy lifestyle, but I would eliminate any and all distractions. I would eliminate, you know, any television that doesn't uplift you, any friends that aren't, you know, aspiring to be better, or, you know, it's really about your network. I mean, what's that saying, Kerry? You know, the 5 people that you hang around. Can you?
Yeah, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with.
I mean, that kind of sums it up right there, man. You know, so mentorship, community, great friends, great people, and you know, we all still have to go in the world and deal with coworkers and things like that. In that case, you know, you're just gonna have to learn how to disassociate, how to build armor around you. Like I remember, you know, before I used to have this job, and I used to like breathe before I went to work, and I would tell myself like, you know, everything's gonna be okay, and like, you know, I have a plan, and I have got this dream, and I would literally build like armor around me, so when I went out into the world, it didn't matter what anybody said or if someone didn't like me or whatever. I had this purpose and I had this dream, and I was gonna fixate it on my mind and in my heart until I accomplished it. And man, I'm so glad that those days are over. The winter is over. And that's the last thing I'll say, is that every season in life has its time. My winter lasted about 4 years. I thought it was never going to end, man. I thought I was going to be in that job forever. And so you want to know what I did? Instead of waiting for tomorrow or reaching for tomorrow, what I did was I just decided to be happy. I was like, you know what? If this is my life, I'll die like this. I'll write cues for television. You know, I'll go to this job. I'll take care of my family. There's something honorable about a man who commits to his plan, commits to his purpose, and then follows through. There's nothing honorable about a man who says he's going to do something and then doesn't do it. If you do it and you fail, then at least you tried, you know? And that was my main thing, was like, if I fail, then I failed, you know, like at least I did it. So if you need any more help or encouragement or specifics, I specifically have compassion and, you know, and sympathy for you. So please, you know, let me serve you how I can, but good luck fighting the good fight. Keep reaching out to publishers, keep reaching out to music houses, keep working on your craft.
Excellent. So listen, guys, we're about 8 minutes over, so I want to wrap up. I want to, you know, big thanks to you, Eddie, and Gary, to both of you for being on this webinar. As you guys know, watching this is our first monthly webinar. We're going to do this once a month just for members of How to License Your Music Premium. So I think this went pretty smoothly. Big thanks to everyone who attended the webinar. The replay will be available on the same page that you're watching this from later this afternoon. So if you want to go back and rewatch this, check that out. There's 2 tracks below this video that Eddie mentioned during this webinar that you can check out, but there's also probably 20 or 30 of Eddie's tracks in the reference library section. So if you haven't already checked that out, it's in the members area. Go to the reference library, and there's tracks by Gary and myself and Eddie. Go listen to those. I feel like one of the most important things you can do as a musician who's trying to license music is just simply listen to music that's being licensed. Listen to what works, and try to model that, to the best of your ability. So huge thanks to everybody. Again, we look forward to doing this on a monthly basis, and we're going to go ahead and sign off. But Eddie and Gary, if you guys could stick around for like 1 or 2 minutes, we'll do a little post-webinar wrap-up. But again, huge thanks, everybody, and we'll see you guys on the next webinar.